Sometimes things just happen that have no real explanation, at least not by anything in this world. I've only had a handful of these experiences in my life, but there's one that's deeply personal. It's tied into grief and loss. But this paranormal experience that I had is ready to be shared. Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Now, the strangeness of this story may be a little difficult for me to get out, but I promised you guys a ghost story, so here it is. It was September of 2007, and I was 22 years old. I had just found out that my father had passed. A few days had gone by, and grief is a strange thing. I was not ready to hear this. This is probably my first big loss. It was just this strange sort of thing was going on. I mean, I'm going to give you a little bit of backdrop, but this is relevant to the story, the emotional state I was in. You have that, we all experience this. You have this sort of feeling that you don't want to accept it. I mean, there's denial. It's part of the process, the denial stage. And I think it was a mix of that and another part of me knew exactly what was happening, almost as if I was expecting it. I've always been kind of an anxious person, preparing for the worst. I didn't really obsess over death or think that my family was I was just gonna lose everybody. I wasn't that kind of kid, but it was this feeling that this is something that was inevitable. And their full reality, like I said, hadn't set in. And it was September. This played into it too. It was this strange feeling that accompanied the funeral. Because, everybody, for those who have lost somebody, it's this empty feeling. It's like a gut punch or a slice, like a slice of you has just been taken away. It's terrible. I don't wish it on anybody, but like I said, it's an inevitable part of life. I say that I expected it, but part of me I didn't. I was just blindsided and still unable to accept it. It was just this horrible, horrible thing that had happened to me. And I remember being at the funeral home, and it was September. You've got the leaves started to change. Things were, turning color and dying, essentially. It's always, it's almost like a comforting thing in September, October. The leaves change, you have these traditions. But for me, it's like that sort of motif was just rolled into the emotions I was feeling. It was just insane. I wanted to enjoy, I just wanted the season to come and be like every other September, October. But like I said, this piece of me was just taken. So I remember being at the funeral home and just experiencing this. It's on the edge of the town. And it was just this sort of strange, ethereal feeling in the pit of my stomach. Couldn't shake it, I was on bereavement for a day or two after the funeral. When your friends and family say goodbye, if there's anything I can do. I mean, my family was there. I'm not saying they weren't there, but after everybody leaves after the funeral, they bring food, they stick around for a day or two. And it was just this incredibly lonely feeling. And my siblings were dealing with it. It was rough for them too. I'm the oldest of four. It may have been the day after. It may have been the day after the funeral. I got up at like 3:30, 4 a.m. and I had to be at work at 5. I worked about an hour, not even an hour, about a half an hour away. I was on my way to work. And this is so strange, but I can't explain this. I can't explain what happened. I was driving and, still got that feeling, that gut punch, that deep feeling in my gut. And it's just, I knew I was approaching I had to pass the funeral home to go on my way to work, and it's still dark out, super early in the morning. So as I go to pass the funeral home, I have got I had a 2001 Honda Civic, and it, was old school. This is before touchscreen. So if you needed to turn the radio on, you had to press your finger and feel it click. I remember to get the power. I mean, you really had to kind of press on that sucker to get the radio to come on. And I mostly listened to CDs in the car. I had a CD player. But as I was passing this funeral home to get out of town to head to work, get on the highway and head to work, as I'm passing, as I come up on the funeral home and I'm right in front of it, the radio came on by itself. And it wasn't just a radio station. I think I listened to some rock stations and some alternative stations, but it wasn't any of that. It turned itself on. And it was an AM station with loud static. I always had a habit too. This is another thing. I always had a habit of turning the radio down before I turn it back on, so that when I go to turn it back on, if I ever do, whether it's CD, radio, whatever, it's not like I turn it on and it just, boom, I hate being scared like that and having a loud sound just explode. I just have a habit of turning the radio down before I turn it off and stuff like that. But when I passed that funeral home, the radio just comes on. And I'm passing the funeral home as this loud, blaring static of AM radio just comes on. And I get this chill, because it's totally freaked me out, okay? It wasn't as loud, and the static and the AM station was not loud enough to make me jump, but it clearly turned itself on. I was just in disbelief, because the amount of pressure that it would have taken with my finger to turn, and it wasn't an accident, my hand was nowhere near the controls. So when I heard this, I could just, it's just like that. I've had this a few times in my life, but if you've ever had that feeling where you can't explain something's happening and you feel like you're being watched, and that's going to come into play here in a second. I started to get that feeling like something, was trying to communicate with me, because what was happening is, on the AM station, there were voices, distorted voices. In retrospect, I should have written down the station. I should have seen what station it was and kind of tested things out and did more research, but this freaked me out so bad that I just, I'll get to what happened here in a second, but it came on. I hit it, as I'm coming past the funeral home, it comes on. I'm rolling past, and for about a couple hundred feet, I'm just cruising at maybe 35 miles per hour. And, it's a few seconds of just sort of listening and taking in what had just happened. And of course, I've got chills running through my whole body, and I froze as if, it's like being spotted by a predator or something. It was just that feeling, this instinctual, defensive feeling, and confusion mixed in with that. It was just so freaky, right at that same spot where, the day before or a few days before that, I remember taking a break outside, from the funeral home and going outside and just wanting to be outside and just feeling that late September, sun beat down, and just thinking about just the season and everything, and the grief and the disbelief and everything mixed into one. And all that was going on. I was replaying that in my mind as that thing, turned itself on and almost started to speak to me. It was heavy static, but in the static, you could hear this voice. And it was, it was like talking for about 3 or 4 seconds. this only happened in the span of 20 to 30 seconds. But it spoke for a few seconds, and then there was a pause, and then it spoke for a few more seconds. And I'm pretty sure that the thought occurred to me. I mean, it just freaked me out so bad. But the thought occurred to me that because of the spacing that this thing was calling out, whatever it was doing, whatever it was calling out for a few seconds and waiting for a response. Now, this only served to freak me out even further, because I really started to get the cold chills, and the hair, every hair, on my back, all the way down my back, up my neck. I felt like the hairs on my head were starting to stand up. And after about 30 seconds, I worked up the nerve to turn it off. And of course, turning it off and on is the same thing. I had to stick my thumb out and put pressure onto the button, onto the manual button. It's not a touchscreen, and click it off. Now, this is where it gets a little strange, because in my rearview mirror, I mean, this was only a flash, okay? Now you can chalk this up to maybe something being in the corner of my eye, a shadow passing. I'm passing under street lights as I'm leaving town. But this feeling that I was being watched was just it started to become pervasive, because after I turned the button off, there was this silence, and it was almost like I was expecting more communication that was going to come from thin air, from the ether or something. That's how strange this was. But the silence was just as terrifying, because I still had this pervasive feeling like I was being watched. And of course, as I'm driving, turn the radio off, I'm still cruising. And I don't think I accelerated. I think the 35 becomes a 50 or 55 zone. I don't know what it is now. This is 20 years ago. But I didn't really accelerate. I stayed at a slow pace and waited. It's almost like I didn't want to rev the engine too much, because I was terrified of this silence that was in the car now. I left all the windows up. Sometimes I'll crack a window. It was almost like I was waiting, but I was also terrified of what I might hear. And in my rearview mirror, I can't tell, I can't remember exactly whether I just saw something, but of course my imagination took over. And I thought I saw something in my rearview mirror that was sitting in my back seat. I think I just may have seen something in the corner of my eye. But who knows? I'm going to leave this up. I'll let you be the judge. But my imagination goes wild, okay? I start to imagine, this is terrible. I mean, this is strange and terrible, but most ghost stories are, that my father was sitting in the back seat. It's almost like I had a vision of it, and he was in the back seat, and he was staring at me and locking eyes with me. I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and I'm imagining my father, from here up, and he had and he was just watching me. I just sort of had this vision, and it could have been my imagination. It was my imagination, maybe mixed, because the initial, radio event was absolutely authentic. I know that. I've never experienced anything like that. I don't think I've really experienced much moving around and stuff, and I don't seek this type of stuff out. Okay, I'm gonna get to that later. Okay, I think this is not at all my father. So yeah, I see in sort of in my imagination, and almost like this. And when I look, there's nothing there, but I'm still frozen, and I want to look back, but I don't. But I sort of have that in my imagination, but I feel, in my senses, It was like that instinctual feeling that something was watching me, something was close by, and it was a feeling of danger. And it was, it was terrifying. I don't usually have experiences like this. I kind of cruise down the road, and you eventually come to more, street lights. Because as the sound increased, there's sort of a dark spot. As you leave town, you come into another small town that's on the highway. As I came into that other town, the interior of the car was more lit up by the lights. It was lit up by the lights, and I finally had the courage to kind of, turn around, look back, and see, am I going to see a face? I didn't know what I was going to see. And that terrified me. But I went ahead and drove to work and had a pretty normal day. But it stuck with me. I think I may have even taken a different route to work the next few days. It's this strange occurrence that, like, I've never had an electronic appliance, even with touch screens nowadays. I've never had an electronic appliance just like randomly turn itself on. Turn itself on and start. It's just so strange to me. I never listen to AM. Who listens to AM radio, especially a station that doesn't come in? I lived in that small town. I think most AM, this was typical. Most AM stations didn't have anything. It was just, a lot of this stuff was just long range, intercepting signals from long range stations. But as I thought about it in the next few days, it became more and more clear to me. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. As I thought about it, it just occurred to me that this thing, whatever it wasn't my father. It was something possibly impersonating my father. That's what it felt like. And the more time goes by, I remember most of it pretty clearly. But if you think about it, it had sort of a trickster kind of vibe to it. It was like something was fishing for my attention, my energy. But one other theory, and I think this is fascinating, that, this is, people know about this. It's no secret, but this is one of the times that I felt, because I don't pursue these things. I don't necessarily ghost hunt. I think haunted places are fascinating. I like to read about them and research them. And of course I do a lot of stuff on this channel that's related to that, but I don't seek this type of stuff out. But when you have powerful emotions, I guess it was the grief and the sadness, the anxiety and the loss may have fueled this thing. It was almost like an energetic signature. Maybe it was from my entire family. Funeral homes are rough, man. I don't care. I've been to plenty of them in the last 15, 20 years. And let me tell you, it never gets easier. You have to walk in and see a loved one laying there. Death is not easy, man. It leaves a hole. And it feels, I think that's why it felt predatory in a way. It felt like this thing was preying on a weakness. It's almost like a shark. It's almost like trickling blood into the water and the sharks come. That's kind of, it was like this predatory feeling. Not during the funeral, but like that place was charged with this energy, and this thing was feeding off of it. And as I passed through or near this sort of whatever it was, call it a doorway, call it a portal, an energetic storm that was, the residual storm, emotional storm of that. I mean, it could have come from other funerals. Think about those places. Those places have to be so etherically charged with whatever. And I'm not pretending to understand this stuff, but as I passed through it, this thing, had enough energy to actually press the button and turn on the radio on my 2001 Honda Civic, man. It's just, I can't explain it. It's something so small that set off a chain of events and energetic, I've been thinking about it for years. This is pretty much my synopsis. But do entities feed on these things? Because that thing felt more demonic than a ghost. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel quite like a human being. And this is, how do I know? How many non-human entities do I encounter? Like I said, I have a few more experiences. I'm going to share this one. And also, before I forget, I do have a video coming out about, if you've ever heard of the stone tape theory. There is a theory that, stones, especially megalithic stones and other limestone, other things can actually hold and trap psychic energy. And that's what ghosts are. Ghosts are sort of this reverberating echo of etheric energy coming out of these objects, mostly natural objects. This is why it also occurs in houses. Wood, the materials that you build a house with can also hold these charges, and that's why you get these kind of paranormal occurrences that stick to physical places. But that video, I'll link it here so you guys can watch that. But I'll also put it in the comments. I'll pin a comment and put it in the description as well. So check that out. That's coming soon if it's not up yet. But yeah, it's a fascinating feeling because, like I said, this thing seemed to feed off of my emotional distress. And I cannot help wondering, years after the fact, I ask myself, if I had tried to communicate with this thing, would it have strengthened and kept that connection? I think it was trying to link an energetic connection to me, and I was, if I had had time to think about it, if somebody had told me, hey, your father, this is, I could have been susceptible to it. Like if a psychic told me your father's going to contact you in the next few days, you better be ready. You better be ready. Like, I would have been like, maybe more receptive. And in the heat of the moment, I could have maybe thought it was my father and tried to communicate with this thing. But I was just so terrified in the moment, hearing that AM static and something sort of, and it, waiting those spaces, like it was almost waiting for a response. Ultimately, I feel like I made the right choice because this is one of my only like direct kind of contact stories. Here's my piece of advice for anybody. Do not seek these things out. Okay? This thing, whatever it was not a human being, but there was this almost trickster spirit to it that wanted me to think that it was a human being, like it wanted to communicate with me. And I didn't, like I said, terror was running through me. But in retrospect, in the years after, right after, it felt like, wow, it was trying to talk to me. It really was trying to talk to me. And I'm just so glad. I am so glad that I didn't. I'm of the opinion that these people that go in and seek these things out and start trying to record stuff and communicate with these things, I don't necessarily have a problem with people going in and trying to record and capture evidence. But when these things start to become seances, it's like, just not good. It's just not good. Okay, this thing, it's just not natural. It is not natural. I mean, biblically speaking, these people were the people that spoke to the dead and necromancers. These people were, the prophets ordered them I mean, in some cases to be stoned to death. It was just sort of like the soothsayers and people who spoke to the dead were seen as like a cancer, a spiritual cancer. And I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think that these things will reach out and try to communicate with people that don't necessarily have a connection or are trying to seek a connection. They'll just spring it on you. And in those moments of grief and sadness, I think you're vulnerable, and they will try to do that. When we experience loss, grief, shame, rejection, all these negative emotions. Some of those weren't included in my experience, but these things happen to other people all the time, and that is like creating a doorway. Call it a doorway, call it a portal, but these things feed on it, and they can smell it from miles away, like the shark analogy with blood in the water. So, like I said, that was my experience. If you guys have not seen my Halloween playlist, I've made a few new videos, and I've got some older ones compiled into a Halloween playlist. Check that out, and check out some of my other work on the channel. There is so much coming. I can't even keep track of the lists of stuff I have for ideas and stuff I have planned for this channel. But stay tuned, and I will talk to you all later.